All right, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Thanks for attending. I know everyone has, video and webinar fatigue at this point, but we really appreciate you being here. Today, we'll be talking about driving student engagement in Handshake. And really, we're going to introduce this great new tool we've come up with that we've recently shared, which is our Handshake Marketing Toolkit. So before I go too much further, I want to talk about a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. This always comes up. We always say the same thing at every webinar, but it's worth saying again. First of all, we will be recording the webinar. So anyone who has registered will receive a recording after the event. And so will any colleague who registered but couldn't come. So you'll get a recording, and anyone who registered but didn't attend will get a recording. You can also forward the recording to anyone that after we send it to you, it's open for you to share. Next up, we're going to have a Q&A section at the end of this webinar, but you don't need to wait to ask your questions. You can simply type them into the chat box that opened when you came to the webinar. So you'll see where it says questions. That's where everyone said, yes, we can hear you. There is a terrible echo. So go ahead and put your questions in. If it's something simple, we'll try to answer it via chat. I'll tell you that we only have the 3 of us here today on this webinar. So if we don't get to all your questions in the chat, we'll try to get to you afterwards in email. Just make sure that you get your question answered, even if we aren't able to get to it in the Q&A section. Finally, I also want to tell you, you'll be seeing, well, not finally, there's 2 more things. You're going to see a few polls throughout the webinar. We'll introduce those as they come up. This is a good thing to know. In addition to the recording that we're going to send, we're also going to send the slides, because I feel like these slides, they have a lot of links, they're really informative, and you guys are going to want to see those as well. So just know that in the follow-up email that you get, you'll get both the recording and the slides. All right, so now let's move on. I'll introduce who we have here today. So my name is Catherine Kelly. I'm a director of marketing at Handshake, but I'm primarily going to be your MC. For the most part, we'll be hearing from Britt Gergen. He's a product marketing manager at Handshake. Hello, Britt. Thank you for joining us. Oh, Britt. Okay, Britt's having audio troubles. Gosh, we're having a little bit of grief here. It's all right. We're going to introduce Brinton Botkin. She's a social and editorial manager at Handshake. And she's also going to be talking to you about how she goes about her marketing job and sharing some best practices and tips. So hello, Brinton, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, great. We're excited to have you. All right. So let's just make sure, Britt, why don't you go ahead and say hello to everyone so we can make sure we can hear you.
Hi, everyone. This is Britt Gergen. So happy to be with you this morning. And I apologize for all of the trouble that my computer is giving me. I think we're in a good place now. I've calmed it down. I've told it that I love it, and I think we're going to be okay.
Okay, well, this is good. We're moving on. I'm glad we sort of got through all the tech problems right at the beginning. All right, so the agenda for today, introductions and housekeeping just happened. Britt's going to talk about leveraging the toolkit. Breaking it into 2 components. One will be how you introduce Handshake to new students, and the other is how you help students who already know about Handshake get the most out of it. Then Brendan's going to do a social and editorial deep dive, and then we'll answer your questions. So let's move right along. We have a poll. Now we're using something called Poll Everywhere. It should have instructions at the top. So see, you can go to that URL, or you can text Handshake C381 to 22333 to join, and then you're going to give your answer. So here we go. Have you used Handshake's marketing toolkit before? The answers are A, yes, I've used 3+ assets in the past. B, I've used 1 to 2 assets. C, I've checked it out but have not used it. D, I haven't checked it out but I plan to. Then it probably takes a while to get all the get it going in your phone. So I'll give you a sec and we'll check the results. Okay. All right, this is great. I'm really happy to see that folks are really, like, they've seen it and they're starting to use some of the things. So that's fantastic. And because in the past here is a fun way to put it, because it was just released. So that's great. So Britt, given that people have some familiarity, why don't you get it started on how they can best use the toolkit? And I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Katie. And thanks everyone for responding. We are going to use that poll everywhere tool later in today's presentation as well. So if you pulled up the URL, you can keep that up. We'll also flash the instructions again when the time comes. So as Katie mentioned, I'm really excited to talk to you about some assets within the toolkit. And as she mentioned, we're going to discuss it in the frame of how you can talk to students who are new to Handshake and how you can talk to students who are returning to Handshake. Before we dive into that though, I want to take some time to talk about the toolkit itself. So just to start off with a quick overview, we built the toolkit to help supplement the great marketing work that you and your teams do every single day. We know that our higher ed partners are one of the most effective channels for promoting Handshake. That's part and parcel to what you do. And we also know that many of you will either be completely or partially virtual this fall. So all of the assets we've built are flexible and can be used virtually or in person. And we're also going to take some time today to share best practices based on our experiences marketing virtually ourselves. Everyone mentioned that they had seen the toolkit before, but if you want to pull it up, the URL is right there, and I can actually throw it in the chat. This is a different URL from the one that we used last year, but if you have the old one bookmarked, it will still redirect to this new location. But there it is, it's learn.joinhandshake.com/marketing-toolkit. Now, if you're looking at the toolkit, you'll see that it's organized into 4 different sections. And that's meant to help you navigate quickly to what you're looking for. So it starts with assets that help you introduce the value of Handshake to new students. Then it moves on to assets that help students optimize their use of the platform. Next, we have a variety of kind of general promotional materials. Think things like splashy posters and social content that help you get the message out about Handshake across multiple channels. And then finally, we link off to a bunch of different resources that help you fine-tune your marketing program. So we're going to touch on elements of all of these sections today. But again, we want to keep it in the kind of simplified context of how do you introduce Handshake to new students, and then how do you help students who are already using Handshake optimize their use of the platform. So with that said, let's start by talking about how to introduce Handshake to new students. I wanted to start by sharing some recent survey data we've collected about the impact of COVID-19 on students. You might have seen some of these stats shared already in blog posts or in emails from Christine Cruz Vergara. But overall, all of the stats on this slide and the ones that I'm going to share today come from 2 surveys. One of them went out in mid-March, and we collected 1,002 student responses from across a wide variety of schools. And then another one went out in early April, and that one had 527 student responses, just so you have a sense of how big the pool was. So first thing I wanted to share about what students need in the age of COVID-19 is that this pandemic has had a strong impact on job inventory. So that really means that students are dealing with a reduction in the number of jobs, and also a little bit of uncertainty about what jobs are still active, even though they might be posted, but they don't necessarily know if it's an old job posting. A couple of other key insights that we got. There was an overwhelming chorus of students saying that they're looking to their Career Center for help in this time. 69% said that they want their Career Center to facilitate connections with employers, and 51% said they need their Career Center's help in uncovering who is still hiring. So when we're thinking about framing the value of Handshake, this information is really helpful in identifying where the biggest needs are for our students. So with that said, the first message that we want to communicate about Handshake is that Handshake is the platform recruiters go to when they're looking for college students or recent grads. The numbers on this slide really speak for themselves in defining the size of our network. So 3.5 million jobs and internships in every industry, 500,000 employers, including the entire Fortune 500, and over 900 schools in our network. I'll also say A key differentiator is that our platform, as opposed to others that students might use to look for jobs, is focused on college students. So the fear and frustration that they might feel around sifting through jobs that they don't qualify for is less present on Handshake because you're not expected to have full-time job experience. Recruiters aren't here recruiting people that are 10 years out of school. They're here recruiting recent college grads, and that level of experience is expected when recruiters are on this platform. Message 2 for new students is that Handshake can help you connect with relevant job postings from active employers. You can count on this platform to facilitate those connections. Companies are consistently performing around 25,000 proactive student searches per month. And on average, last year, 16 million proactive messages were sent to students by employers on the platform. And just to embellish that point, a few weeks ago, we hit an all-time high, a brand new milestone of having 1 million messages sent in a single week. So as you can see, these two stats, I think, really help to underline the fact that employers are active on Handshake, and it is a place where you can go to foster connections with them. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is that you all know that Handshake helps recommend relevant opportunities based on your background and profile, but we're also taking new steps to ensure that we are showing fresh content to students. Two really cool updates that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks are that we're going to be adding a new tag that says fresh to job postings that were recently posted so that students can more easily understand which postings are recent. And we're also going to be releasing a new collection on the student homepage that shows the student recommended recently active employers. So not only is Handshake going to recommend opportunities and employers to you, but we're also taking steps to make sure that you're seeing active and like recently posted content as well. Okay. So next, let's talk about how you can communicate these messages to students based on assets in the toolkit. So we're going to talk about presentations, some one-pagers, and some blog posts that we have to help you deliver this message. So first, I want to touch on the introductory presentation. This presentation covers all of the basics of why students should use Handshake. It's also customizable, so you can co-brand it, you can add, remove, or customize slides as you see fit. We know that that was a big ask from our partners, so this deck is a great place to start. And when it comes to presenting this content, we highly recommend getting in front of students during any major events you can, whether that's at orientation or information sessions or even within classes themselves. Orientation is one that we typically recommend very highly and any other back to school events just because there's typically very high attendance and it's a great opportunity to get in front of students. I would love to hear in the questions panel if your institution has made any decisions about how orientation or any of your other regular back to school programming is going to be held. This deck obviously works very well for virtual channels as well, but just curious to hear if people know how they're going to be approaching it. Okay, so some folks saying that they don't know yet, they'll hear soon. A lot of people saying virtual. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, that's super helpful. It does seem like virtual is the overwhelming majority here. So yeah, this is, as I said, this presentation works really well if you're doing a virtual meeting. So any opportunity you have, feel free to check out these slides, add or remove whatever you see fit, and we think it's a great way to introduce Handshake to new students. You can also share it. You can share it directly with students if you want, but faculty, alumni, and campus influencers or other campus partners are great to share it with as well, if they would have the opportunity to share even just one slide about what Handshake is to kind of expand your reach. Okay. We've also got a series of one-pagers or guides that succinctly describe Handshake's value. 3 of them are linked here. You can see them in the toolkit as well. I want to call out one in particular. We have this guide, it's linked here as Why Use Handshake, that talks about why Handshake is better for college students than other job platforms. So it goes back to the point I made earlier about recruiters coming to Handshake looking specifically for college students and not for like a broader variety of people with expertise. So that one's definitely worth checking out. These guides are obviously really great to pin up or print out in person, but they also work virtually as well. So you can always email them as attachments to newsletters or other emails that you're sending to students. They're also great for you to share with your staff, just to provide them with really quick talking points. So, even if it's as you're wrapping up an appointment, you're kind of giving a quick pitch on Handshake or talking about one particular value point that Handshake can bring to a student. These guides have really kind of succinct and snappy language in them that are really great to repurpose in that way. And finally, we've got a lot of great blog content in the marketing toolkit, and several of them are really helpful for introducing Handshake to students as well. These, just like the guides, can be shared via email. You can also link them on your website, or if you have your own blog, you can repost them there. We also think it's a great idea to link to our blog in your email signature. There's a lot of really great content, and it's frequently being updated. Brinton can actually speak to this a little bit later. She is one of the major drivers behind content for the blog. One important thing to note is that in addition to the blog content that's linked here, we also have a whole section on our blog that's called Get Hired Remotely, and that's centralizing the blog content we're creating on navigating a virtual career search. I'm going to throw that link in the chat right now so that you have it. This is a little bit more mixed as far as like who your audiences might be, but it's a really great resource to check out. It's getting updated regularly, and it covers everything from like how to stand out to recruiters in a virtual environment to how to make a good impression in a virtual interview. Alrighty, and I wanted to wrap this section up with a quick tip. So for those of you who aren't aware, Handshake for the last year has allowed our partners to opt into an email campaign that we send to students who haven't yet logged into Handshake. We've seen great successes from these campaigns in the past. We've activated hundreds of thousands of students over the last year, and these campaigns are aligned around the messaging that we just discussed. So they're a great way to supplement your existing marketing program. We always share the dates that these emails are going to go out ahead of time. We send, one email to unactivated students or students who haven't logged in yet at a time, and it's on a regular cadence, so you can kind of keep tabs on when they're going to go out. And again, this is a really easy way for you to kind of allow Handshake to take on some of the time commitment needed to get messaging out to your students. The primary content in these emails is recommended job content, but we're also starting to weave in some of the blog content. And of course, given the state of the world right now, all of the email language is very sensitive to the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact that might have had on students. So just wanted to give a quick plug for that as a great way to also help deliver the value of Handshake to your students who haven't logged in yet. Excellent. So let's move on to talking about how students who are already using Handshake can optimize their approach. And just like before, I wanted to share some survey data. So here are a couple of interesting statistics that color our approach to building marketing materials. And what I wanted to really underline here is that students are still often unaware of some of Handshake's most interesting features. You can see here, when we put our survey out into the world, we found that 7% of students had heard of or had used the peer messaging feature in Handshake. 14% of students indicated that they had explored employer reviews, and 20% of students indicated that they had heard of job role pages. We think that these are really compelling ways for students to unlock more value from Handshake and make better connections with employers, connect with their peers, and really enrich their job search experience. So message number 3 to deliver to your students is that Handshake can help you network. It's pretty clear from these stats there's a lot of value for students to unlock using our peer-to-peer features. There are over 100,000 reviews on Handshake that cover over 65,000 companies. We have an enormous network of students and alumni that you can message to get relevant career advice. And we also have information about over 1,000 industries and job functions through our Q&A and job role pages. So talking about these different features that Handshake offers is a great way to enrich students' experience on the platform. And message 4, and this is perhaps most important, is that we want students to understand the power of their profile. You might have heard us talking about this. Well, we've talked about the value of a Handshake profile since I joined Handshake over 3 years ago. But we want to continue to share that message because it is super powerful. I mentioned earlier that employers sent 16 million proactive messages to students last year. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen their messaging rate skyrocket. So, I mentioned that milestone of hitting 1 million messages per week. In the age of COVID-19, this is a channel that employers are leaning on even more heavily to interact with students and form that connection. Employers are also using student career interests to target their messages. So they are looking for students based on the types of jobs, the job role preferences, and the location preferences that they've set in Handshake. They're so interested in using this information that we found that 80% of students who share their career interests get messaged. And as I mentioned, there are just 3 fields you need to get started. They don't require any experience to fill out. You just need to know or be able to indicate areas of interest around location, job role, and job type. Job type, just to define that one, is literally like full-time or part-time or internship work. Another really interesting stat that I wanted to share about employer messaging on the platform is that employer messages have about a 50% read rate. Employers think that that is incredible. That is 2 to 4 times more engagement than they see on other job platforms where they can message candidates. But at the same time, I think it's really interesting to think about that from a student perspective, that students are essentially not opening half of the messages they get from recruiters. So talking about the fact that this is such an important way for students to be able to connect with companies that are of interest to them on the platform, or companies they haven't heard of before, I think that number could go up even higher, and students can be opening more messages that they're receiving. So there's a really great opportunity here to introduce more students to this and coach them on how to respond properly to employer messages. Brinton also has published a blog post specifically about responding to employer messages. So we have content that can help them do that as well.
Hey guys, why don't we have Brinton, why don't you send that to everyone in the chat? That would be great. I'm also curious.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I'm curious to hear.
I'm grabbing the link now.
Oh, thanks. How many folks on the call are surprised to hear that 50% of messages go unresponded to when an employer reaches out to a student? I think Britt and I really talked about that a lot, where the employers are so excited. They're like, yeah, 50%, it's a great read rate. And like, sure, I'm like, industry averages, but, I know not surprised. Yes, lots of people say not surprised. Yeah, many students think active recruiters are a scam. Not surprised. Literally everyone is not surprised. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Some people are saying.
And
yeah.
Well, and I think people are making a good point here, which is that employers need to take the extra step to ensure that their message is personalized. And I know that's something that our product team is really focused on, giving them ways to put a human face, or like an alumni, or just a recruiter who has a similar background to that type of student at the forefront of their messages, so that they read less like a form email. So that's something we're looking to drive as well, and hopefully that'll help students feel more of a connection. And obviously, like, it's more important than ever that employers invest in that when they're messaging. Great. Okay. So let's talk about what we have in the toolkit that can help you deliver these messages. So as before, we've got great guides, blog posts, and a presentation that we're going to talk about. The distribution channels we recommend are similar to what I shared before. So that's everything from, getting in front of students during events, sending these out via email, linking to them via your website, or adopting them as talking points amongst your team and other campus partners. That said, the audience can be a little bit different for these. So these assets are really for helping students who are already familiar with Handshake and are looking to get more value out of it. So we'll talk about different assets that focus on profile completion, getting noticed by recruiters, and then peer learning on Handshake as well. So first up, we've got a lot of great assets about completing your profile. There are 2 guides you can see here that focus on top fields you should fill out. We have an entire deck devoted to profile completion. So again, if you have an opportunity to present in front of students, this is a great resource to check out. You can grab a couple of slides, you can present the whole thing. But there are a lot of different ways to kind of like frame the value of a profile, a complete profile. And we wanted to make sure that we enabled you to do that. Just like with the other deck, that one's completely customizable. So you can have at it, co-brand it, add your own content. But we wanted to give you something to start with. And then finally, we shared a blog post that is specifically focused on 3 things you should have on your profile. And again, these blog posts give you a little bit more of like a narrative format for sharing this information, a little bit less, concise and punchy than the one-pagers. So it's really great to share via email, share via social, that kind of thing. On the topic of getting noticed by recruiters, we've got some guides as well on how to stand out. This kind of ties back into filling out your profile because a lot of what you can do to stand out to recruiters on Handshake is to have a compelling profile. But again, this is a little bit broader than just focusing on specific fields. This blog post I also really wanted to call out. It's a great one to share because it includes tips from recruiters themselves on how to stand out in a virtual context. I especially wanted to highlight this quote from a recruiter at Box who talks about fighting the misconception that you need an engineering background to join a tech company. I think that message is one that a lot of students would benefit from hearing. So this more kind of like long form blog content is a great way to highlight that type of insight. And then finally, when it comes to promoting our peer learning features, we've got 2 great blog posts that highlight reviews, our Q&A forum, and the peer messaging feature as well. And yeah, so these are another great set of assets to share out to help promote those features. Okay, one more quick set of tips that I wanted to share before I hand it over to Brinton. These tips are also included in the toolkit itself, I should say, but 3 quick things to make sure your emails are super effective. And I adhere to these rules very, very rigidly, and Katie can talk about how we kind of approach writing emails as well. But first and foremost, whatever you are driving students to do, what we would call your call to action, whether it's registering for an event, reading an article, or applying for a job, you want to make sure that that action is featured prominently in your email, visually prominently, and then also not too far down. So ideally, the student should not have to scroll to find it. In fact, we use the old newspaper term of keeping it above the fold as a way to kind of indicate that whatever you want students to do, you should make sure that you're asking them to do that in the first, like, top half of your email. Katie, anything to add on above the fold or keeping your call to action prominent?
Just that it's harder than you think, in that we all have more tolerance for our, Britt's gonna laugh as I say this because it's like I'm a broken record, but we all have more tolerance for our own writing and think our own writing is more interesting than anything that anyone else writes. And so whenever I write a message, and this is what I'm paid to do, and Britt as well, boy, it's really hard to keep it to the point. So shorter is going to be better. The students are skimming. And I would say sometimes, it can be the first line as a hyperlink or where you want them to go, use bold. But when you think you've made your messages short, make them even shorter. That's what I would say.
And I would just like to clarify that I am not at all deluded about how fabulous my writing is, and I'm a little offended that you've made that
okay, well,
assumption.
everyone is not, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, anyway, that's really good advice. We always want to make sure that we are tailoring our content, and tailoring in the sense of like cutting stuff out to make sure that we're getting to the point very quickly. And that helps you make your call to action really prominent. Next thing I wanted to share is that you want to try to make sure that you're targeting a unique subset of students with your content. It'll always perform better that way. A rule of thumb that's been shared with me before is that you should try and email about 10% of your entire audience at any given time. And I've spoken to a lot of schools that do segmented newsletters by career cluster or major or industry as a way to ensure that they are tailoring content to their audience, and that helps them drive higher engagement rates. So I'd actually love to hear from anyone in the meeting right now. If you do something similar to that, like a segmented emailing strategy, feel free to write into the questions box. Just super curious. Lauren sharing that they do a separate thing for pre-law. It's a thing, a separate email for pre-law and for business. Oh, interesting insight from Emily. Emily shares that our career cluster emails have twice the open rate of our other email messages. Maggie shares we do separate ones for seniors versus the rest of undergraduate. That makes a lot of sense. There you're looking at people who are probably actively seeking full-time opportunities versus internships. Susan Sheets, hi Susan, sharing that they have 7 different career path areas. Yeah, a lot of really great insights here. It looks like a lot of people are doing segmented outreach. Awesome, that's great. Thanks everyone for sharing. Okay, the last thing I wanted to share here is that it's always a good idea to keep an eye on how your emails are performing and use that to inform your approach in the future. There's actually a really great report that MailChimp put out that I frequently find myself referencing. I can share it in the chat later. They found that the average open rate for marketing emails across all industries is about 21.3%, and the average click rate is about 2.6%. So that's kind of helpful for helping benchmark where you want your emails to be as far as engagement. Another thing I'll share is that if you're looking at your open rate, that can be a great way to help you determine the efficacy and the impact of your subject line and the sender name that you're using, because that is the initial carrot that you give to students to try and get them to open the email. Who is this email coming from and what is my subject line? So if you have bandwidth, I highly recommend experimenting with those 2 fields, the subject line and the sender name, to see what works best with your audience. We talk a lot about this when it comes to first destination survey emails. If you can get the email coming from your president or a dean or someone else with a lot of clout on campus, you're going to drive higher open rates. And then similarly, the prominence of your call to action can really be measured by your click rate. So if you're looking at the percentage of students that click on your call to action, or the click in general, that can tell you how good you're doing at making it prominent. It's also a really good idea to link your call to action multiple times. You might see this if you look really closely in emails that I send. Occasionally I'll tell you to register for a webinar using a button, but I'll also link to the registration page in the body of the description as well. It might look kind of extra or superfluous, but that actually helps drive a higher click rate. Katie, anything to share on email analytics and ways to kind of parse them?
No, I think that those are all good tips. And we had a lot of engagement. Oh, here's a good question that we might as well just get to now because it speaks to exactly what we're talking about. What's an average, standard, and good open rate? So, Britt, do you want to answer this? Do you want me to answer it?
You can answer it. I'm going to pull up that MailChimp report and share it with everybody because it's my favorite.
Yeah, that's great. So it depends what industry you're in. So, Brenton, I would be interested if you know as well. I know that in higher ed, and I believe I got this, I'll try to actually, when Brenton's talking, I'll try to find this article in Inside Higher Ed. The higher ed rate, now that might be not just for students, but globally, and we know that non-students will probably open their emails more, is something like 24%. Yeah, I'm gonna double check on that. I think it's in the 20s. I know that often marketing emails just across industries, it's something like 17%. I mean, it's low, it's really low. It's a lot lower than you would think. So I don't know if that's helpful to you. But and for folks who are asking, how do I see what you're sharing? I just want to make sure you can go to your chat, the chat box. It's sort of underneath, it's in that panel that popped up. We're putting all of the resources in there. So, and of course, if you ever have any questions and you just feel like you need a few more resources, you can always email us as well. So we'll be sure to give those to you. Okay, Britt, are you ready to keep going?
Yes, and actually this is my denouement, so I'm going to hand it over to Brinton to talk about social and editorial at Handshake.
Awesome, thanks, Britt. I'm really excited to chat about social and editorial. Handshake's social platforms that we use and our student-facing blog are my babies. So I'm very excited to dive in. And please excuse me if I nerd out a little bit about social media because it is my passion. So you can go ahead and proceed. Thank you so much. So when it comes to promoting content across social and reaching your students on your social channels, it's really important to ensure that you are prioritizing your content and your time. This will make your social life the easiest and most effective that it can be. So the three things that I would suggest when scheduling and sequencing social are to first identify your key themes. I think that the way that social kind of goes off the rails for a lot of people and for universities is when they try to do all things for all people on all channels, and that's simply not feasible for most university career centers. Even on Handshake, we only have a handful of themes that we're focusing on at a time. So what does your career center want to focus on providing for your students this term? And try and identify those themes. Think about where your students are during a specific time period and what they're really focused on during those key moments. So if you're planning out social for fall, think about what students are prioritizing while they're diving back into school. Social is the best way to reach them where they are at any given time. So making sure that you are delivering the right messages and resources to them based on their priorities during any specific moment is key. And then the second point is to identify your bandwidth. You know, which social platforms can you or your team realistically create content for? Where are you getting the most engagement? You can't do it all. Even on Handshake, we only focus on 4 social platforms. We've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn are the ones that we really pour our time and energy into because we have a limited team. And I know a lot of the career centers who are on this call might only have one person who's focusing on social media. You might have a full team, or it might just be you trying to juggle that with everything else. So really being realistic about what your bandwidth is important. And we've also linked to a best practices doc for social media in the toolkit. And then I've also partnered with Tiffany Taylor on a video for the Handshake Academy where I talk about some of the best practices for each specific channel. But you know, if you're limited on asset creation, Instagram might not be your best platform. Twitter is a really great platform for having an open conversation, whereas LinkedIn might be better for longer form content. So it's really dependent on where your bandwidth allows you to focus your energy and just really diving into those key platforms for your channels. And then thirdly, I would really recommend planning and scheduling in advance. One thing that I think is really important is to create a content calendar that gives you a holistic view across whichever social channels you're focusing on. So if you're using a planning tool that's really useful for, you know, queuing up your social content to automatically post, but it's also important for you to be able to take a quick glance at a calendar and see, okay, we're promoting this blog post on Twitter today, but we're also going to be posting an Instagram asset that points back to that blog post as well to ensure that you're really hitting your content on all sides. And then there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. I have, as a content marketer, used even just a Google Sheet to create a content calendar, but there are also more, I suppose, you know, intense tools like Asana where you can build out a really intensive promotion calendar, and this will just help keep you organized. So whatever works for you and your team is important. And just for some free scheduling tools that I personally use for our Handshake channels that I think are really useful is for Instagram, we use Later, which has a free tier. And then we also for Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, we use Hootsuite, which also has a free tier. These both also have paid versions, but it does really help to be able to queue up your content weeks in advance to make sure that everything's running smoothly, so you're not scrambling trying to get your content up and in front of students at any given time. All right, Britt, you can proceed. Thank you. So I would love to hear about which social channels your teams are currently using when it comes to your student marketing. I've already talked a little bit about which channels we're focusing on here at Handshake, but if you want to respond to this poll and let us know where you're focusing your energy, that would be awesome.
And if I set this one up correctly, it should allow you to answer multiple channels if you are using multiple. And I also wanted to call out that I put the link to Later and Hootsuite's websites in the chat.
Excellent.
Hey, on this poll, guys, let's leave it up for a little bit longer because I saw some feedback that some folks didn't have time to dial in last time.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
sorry about that, y'all.
And for anybody who's answering other, I would really love to know which channels those are. So if you don't mind shooting those over in the questions, if you're answering other, I'd really be interested to hear which channels you're using outside of these core bunch of channels. I'm also very interested.
TikTok. Don't
exactly.
you?
We're not even using TikTok.
Yeah.
Maybe you all are beyond my help. Maybe I'm out of my league here. If people are already using TikTok, I'm very impressed. This is really awesome. I love seeing the distribution of different channels that are coming through here. And it totally proves that there are, so many different areas where you can reach your students in different ways. I think that the breadth of social platforms is really, really intriguing. So I was expecting, most people to just be using LinkedIn or Twitter. And just so everybody knows, I am the one who is seeing all of your social content. If you're tagging us on the channels where Handshake is active, I am seeing your posts. I love seeing them. So keep on keeping on. I think it's really exciting. All right.
Clinton, we had a question come in that I wanted to pose to you since it's kind of relevant, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So David asked, what is the advantage of using Later compared to Hootsuite for Instagram? David's institution uses Hootsuite for everything.
Yeah, David, this is purely a personal preference for me. Later has a really nice visualization tool so that you can see the grid view and adjust your grid view for your Instagram page when you're scheduling. So for me, it's the tool itself has a little bit more of an easy user experience. And because that is the channel that I'm spending the most active time on curating visually, that has been really useful for me. But Hootsuite is also a great tool. Obviously, we use it for our other channels, but because Instagram is like a big focus point for me, I really tailored my platform of choice based on how I could visually curate.
Hey, Brenton, before we move on to, I just want to share with so many people say, these are the others, okay? Just so before we move on, people are saying Vimeo, people are saying podcasts, people are saying that they have an alumni network / mentoring platform, powered by Graduate. They're using that, smart idea. Someone said Snapchat, but they changed their feature. Students often enjoy it, as happened across the land. People sort of gave up on Snapchat. Great. Okay, just wanted to share those.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. And I'm really excited to see that. So thank you, everybody. And Britt, I guess we can proceed if it seems like the polls have slowed down. All righty. So in terms of what's coming over the next quarter, we're really focused on helping our students succeed remotely. So because I am planning both social and editorial, so our student blog content and our student-facing social, we're going to be really tightly aligned in our content areas for this quarter. And we want to be able to serve as a resource in addition to all of you to help students during this virtual season. It's scary. There's a lot of uncertainty right now for students who aren't sure what's coming in the fall. So we really want to make sure that we are equipping students to succeed whatever comes in the next season. So we're going to be focused on a couple of specific content buckets. Those are going to be finding a job remotely, succeeding at work or school remotely, highlighting student stories, and then something that I think some of you may already see is surfacing interesting employers. We're really excited to be updating a really large list of actively recruiting employers on our blog. And we're also going to be creating sub lists based on our data about recruiters that are actively searching for students and young alums. And so we're creating sub lists like government agencies that are hiring, tech companies that are hiring, social media organizations that are hiring. And we're going to be promoting those on both the blog and on social. So we'll be really tightly aligned on what we're putting out there. We're also going to be focusing on video how-to content. Some of you may have seen actually me posting a video on our Instagram page that was shared on Facebook as well. And it's also available in the toolkit. But we're launching a series called Handshake How-Tos, which are pretty low production videos where we talk through specific product features and guide students through specific use cases. So our first episode was how to fill out your student profile. And we have another one in the queue right now about how to search for employers. So we actually are putting the power in your hands for those videos where you can vote in the polls at the end of each video in the series, where you can decide which one we should create next. And something that I think is really important to call out is that during this moment when marketing during COVID-19, you know, high production value is not the focus, and nor should it be the focus. This is a real moment to create authentic connection with your audience. So, you know, to be quite frank, have been filming those videos in my living room, and it's not a highly produced, you know, commercial style video. It's going to be, you know, selfie cam, face-to-face video, and that's how you really are building connections right now. And we're seeing that across all kinds of brands. So if you, for example, were to turn on TV right now, even the commercials you're seeing are people who are recording from their own homes. Saturday Night Live are recording from their own homes. So it's a really good opportunity to connect personally with your audience. Alrighty, Britt, you can move on to the next one. Thank you. So I know a lot of you are interested in figuring out how to expand your social reach, and something that is a really good opportunity for a lot of universities is to heighten your impact by tapping other accounts. So if you have access to larger university accounts, rather than just your career center account, that is a really great way to expand your impact. It's also important to identify on-campus influencers. You know, if you can engage students that have a wider impact, whether that is by tapping student government or, you know, figuring out how to engage students who have a large social presence already or might be well connected in your student body. If you're able to put these resources in front of those students so that they can disseminate that information as well, it's a really, really good option for you. And then you can also consider non-social placements. So do you have your social accounts linked at the bottom of every email? Are you plugging your social accounts during your student orientation? Are you including your handles on your printed collateral? These are some really good ways to expand your social reach with the resources that you already have available to you. All right, Britt, we can proceed here. Awesome. So I would love to hear, for those of you who are already focusing on social, do you have access to your institution's main social accounts? So are you receiving promotion from your main campus Instagram account, Twitter account? Are they able to show you a little bit of love? All right, and I'm seeing some polls come in here. This is a really good area of opportunity if you're able to forge those partnerships with whoever is running those accounts. It can be a really great way to make a bigger impact with your current student body and among your alumni. All right, so it looks like the vast majority are able to get some of that love sometimes. And then some don't have access to that, which is totally fine. I do think it's important when you're posting on social, if you don't have access to those larger social accounts, that you're geotagging where you can on campus, that you're using any university hashtags that are important to make sure that you're getting visibility within some of this, within some of these larger social feeds. All right, yep, it looks like a good mix here. All right, Britt, we can proceed. Thank you. And then from here, I just wanted to touch on Handshake branding. I know that there is a lot of concern about co-branding and things like that. We do have some guidelines that are included in our toolkit. So that's linked in the deck that we'll be sending around as well. And that's going to be really robust guidance for how you can use the logo, how you can co-brand with your university. But just as a quick overview, we do have primary logo use, which is our icon and our word mark. But then we also have our secondary logo use, which is just our little handshake icon. And then our main colors for those are black, white, and red. And we've got some really more detailed instruction about how you can use those in those guidelines. But our font families, I know that not everybody wants to go out and buy a font family, and I think that's completely fine. Ours are Ginto and Swiss, which are linked also in that guideline doc. But we have also found that Helvetica is a really good substitute for the Swiss family. So if you want something that looks Handshake produced, but you might be working on it on your own in your career center, Helvetica is a really good option there. And my personal pro tip, honestly, for creating social content is to utilize Canva as an easy design option. It's free to users, but if you do decide to utilize premium, which I believe is $9 a month, you can actually create a brand kit within Canva. So you can upload all the colors that you can find in that brand toolkit, all of the logos that we have available to you, and your own university's logos as well, any font families. You can basically just make it so that all of those things are saved in one place. It makes asset creation really, really easy. I admit that I use Canva a lot, even with full access to Photoshop and Illustrator. I find Canva really easy to use, and I think it would be really useful for a lot of career centers. Britt, is there anything else you would want to add about the guidelines for our branding?
I think you've hit all the important points. I did share the brand guidelines and the Canva brand kit links in the chat. We had a question come in from Logan asking if we use content from a blog post to create a Canva post and want to share/tag you, are we allowed to put your logo on it? Absolutely you are. The brand guidelines
Yes.
are meant to help you understand like how we want the logo to look, but pretty much you can just copy them out of there and plop them onto your content. And I think Brenton will gladly like engage with
Yes.
you on social.
Absolutely. And on a selfish note, I will say that I am seeing several career centers using some of the blog content that I've actually personally written and turning it into social content, which for me is exciting on two fronts, because I'm just seeing, you know, all of my favorite little babies being turned into one awesome piece of content. So thank you so much for doing that. I love seeing it. I try to engage when I can. And it's looking great. So thank you very much. And I think that's all that I have, Britt, if we want to move forward to some Q&A.
Guys, I've been keeping track of questions here, and we only have 4 minutes, but I want to say this. This has been a lovely webinar. The questions have been really great, and a lot of the questions are to each other. So I will tell you, I will commit to this group that I think that Britt and I will put our heads together and come up with a way to do this again and have it be more about sharing between you versus just us to you. If you have feelings about that or would love to meet up more regularly with other career center marketers, do let us know, because We would love to talk marketing with you guys. It's fun for us too, and we can maybe make it a little bit more casual. I'm seeing a lot of yeses, so that's cool. Okay, great. So let's do just like a quick dash through. Britt, I want to ask you 2 questions about the emails that Handshake sends that the school opts into. The questions are, if we opt in for Handshake emails, can students unsubscribe? Also, how do you opt into those emails?
Great questions, and I have answers to both of them. So to address the first one, students can unsubscribe from the campaign, but it will only unsubscribe them from that campaign. It will not unsubscribe them from emails that you send to them via Handshake. It will not unsubscribe them from system-generated notification emails in Handshake. It is a completely separate entity. So if they unsubscribe from that, they're just unsubscribed from those campaign emails that we send. And for how to opt in, I can grab a quick Help Center article and share that with you all. I'll put it in the chat.
Great, awesome. Okay, Brenton, here's a good one for you. Do you recommend using LinkedIn as a company page or as a group page? We currently have ours set up as a group page, but I've noticed Handshake has theirs as a company page.
Yes, so I think for your individual career centers, if you're really hoping to engage with your students, a group page is a good option for you. For us, a company page makes the most sense just because of the wide range of ways that we're using it. We're representing all 3 sides of our business, so the student side, the employer side, and the university side. So it made more sense for us. But I think if you're really wanting to facilitate conversation on your LinkedIn page and have people feel a part of a community, the group setting is a really good option.
Awesome. And then the final question that we could all weigh in on, and then I know people will probably filter out, but we have many questions that were sort of similar about how often to email people. And this is something I think a lot of marketers think about a lot. We think about this a lot when we email you guys. So these questions sort of are like, we're afraid we're spamming people. we're trying to make sure students actually read things. How often would you suggest emailing them? So I'm going to say definitely not more than once a week. That would be my thought. Someone asked how many times a week. I would say 1. I'm curious about how many times people are. This would be a great follow-up webinar theme. It's just sort of email generally, but Britt, do you have any thoughts, or Brenton, on email cadence?
I think that once a week is a good rule of thumb. I will say that if you are emailing more than once a week, I would try and send from different senders and have the subject matters be very different. I know candidly, this is something we think about at Handshake, the amount that we are inundating you with email and making sure that the content is fresh, not duplicative, and has a very specific point of view. So yeah, once a week is a good rule of thumb, but make sure you're mixing it up if you do it more often than that. It's certainly not bad to do so, especially if you're seeing good engagement rates.
And I would say if you have so much content that you're thinking that you want to send 3 emails a week, consider ways that you can promote that same content on social, where it's a little bit less likely that students would be overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, especially because everyone knows how time intensive it is to come up with content. If you push it all out right away, you just risk people aren't going to see it. So you really need to be thoughtful about spacing it out. And also it helps you get a breather on your workload because no one can keep up with producing content. It's a beast. You have to keep feeding it. So it's kind of nice to space it out as well. So thank you so much. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your lively questions. Thank you, Britt, and thank you, Brenton. And we look forward to doing this again with you guys, maybe in a more interactive way. So look out for our recording and look out for the slides. They'll be coming tomorrow, and we hope to speak to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all. Thanks so much.
Bye.